Good morning, everyone. I'm Catherine with Symplicity. We're just going to give a few more minutes for people to join and we'll get the webinar started. We were just talking about how it's 40 degrees and sunny here in Grand Rapids, Michigan, and we're excited about that. And Paul promptly said it's 62 in Austin, Texas, and showed off a little bit.
Hey, it's chilly for Austin.
Yeah, that's short sleeve weather for us Michiganders.
Catherine, you're on mute.
All right, looks like we had a little microphone issue there. It's really operator error, if I'm going to be honest. So we're going to go ahead and get started. We got our attendees joining. So welcome to Symplicity Communications webinar with our awesome service provider, Ada, on the hot topic of automated customer support in ChatGPT. We're excited to bring you this hot topic today. I'm Catherine Barenbrinker. I'm the president and CEO of Symplicity Communications Incorporated. A couple of housekeeping items. First and foremost, I wanted to thank Doug Seitz for his marketing efforts and running the webinar today. We just couldn't do this without his help, and so thank you so much, Doug. Rodney and Lo, thank you so much for sending out the invitations and having everyone join our call. We're so excited about that, and we really appreciate all your efforts. There is a Q&A section, so if you want to click on that, a window will open, and feel free to throw in questions. Paul's going to be monitoring that and try to interject those questions. It's a webinar, so we really like to make it as interactive as possible, so go ahead and throw out those questions. All right, a little bit about Symplicity Communication. We are in our 17th year of business. I started Symplicity January of 2007. We are a woman certified company. We're headquartered in Grand Rapids, Michigan. We have a Dallas, Texas office as well. We really are focused on technology and making that process of procuring technology easier for our clients. I'd like to introduce Paul Nagel today. He's our Vice President of Customer Experience. Paul and I have known each other for a couple of years, and he joined the organization last year. He started his journey in customer experience and automation when he was a teenager working in call centers, and he worked his way all the way up to working at a call center for Discover Card where they had 4,500 agents. So he definitely has some deep experience both on the end user side as well as he navigated several positions with companies like Nice and Contact and Corvisa and Sarah Nova. So he's really got some deep knowledge both on the end user side as well as some of the cloud contact center. And we're really seeing that market change with the automation and customer experience. So Paul, why don't you go ahead and tell a little bit more about Symplicity and then introduce our keynote speaker today.
Absolutely. Thank you, Catherine. So here at Symplicity, we have really three main focus areas that we look at. One is technology expense management, whereas we help companies look at their invoices. We analyze them, make sure that they're not overpaying on the licenses or the subscriptions that they have in those, and also help them consolidate those into less bills. It's a very good thing that we've done for a lot of customers and help them save millions of dollars, even in a year's time. The other thing that we focus on is definitely customer experience and automation. This is an area that I'm very passionate about. I've worked for companies that just live, dream, and die by the customer experience. And obviously, the automation part is something we're going to be talking about quite a bit today. And again, a big reason why I'm here with Symplicity. The third area, which is something everybody needs today, is just managed IT and cybersecurity. With all of the threats that are out there, and a big area of focus for us. So with that, I'm going to introduce Ben. Ben is our Director of Partnerships with Ada, and he'll be going along with that. I'll be trying to interrupt him at the appropriate times with some of the questions that we see come in the chat, or in the question or in the chat area. And so Ben, we'll turn this over to you.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. Really great to see so many people joining a live webinar, and from so many great companies. The interest in automation and in new technology like this is really just taking everything by storm. So I think it's really fun to be able to have this conversation. So my name is Ben. I run the partnerships team here at Ada. I'll speak a little bit about Ada in a minute, but really, my job is to be the connective tissue between the technology providers that our company integrates with, works with, partners with. We're very excited that OpenAI, the creator of ChatGPT, is one of those companies that we work very closely with. And then also on the channel side, working with, great consultancy and services companies like Symplicity to really roadmap the art of the possible and create that amazing end-to-end customer experience journey that helps you interact with your customers in a way that is meaningful and impactful and helps you retain your clients and get more out of that relationship. So Ada ourselves, we are a customer service automation platform. In its simplest term, you can think about us as a chatbot. We think about ourselves as being a company that is powered by AI, but built for humans. Our main primary goal is to put the power into the hands of the business stakeholders that know what it's like to converse with and talk to customers. So our goal is to democratize this ability of building automation and give it to you, the VP of customer support, and your team, to help your team learn how to, instead of answer inquiries or answer phone calls, actually build out automation that allows you to scale. And we work with companies across lots of different verticals. We do very well with companies that are growing fast in the e-commerce and retail space, fintech, software as a service, gaming, et cetera. You can see our logos here. And we've really emerged as a market leader, and are really excited about the future of this space with the emergence of technology like ChatGPT, which we'll be talking about a bunch today.
Hey, Ben.
So, yeah, go ahead.
The notifications, the PowerPoint is pixelated. Can you stop it and reshare it?
Yeah. Are you seeing it pixelated on your side there?
Yeah, we did.
Is that looking better now?
Much better.
Okay, sorry about that. So let's throw up a poll first and foremost, and just kind of get the first feedback that we're receiving here around, whenever technology like this is launched, and gets so much kind of consumer engagement, often what happens is this trickle down effect where the leaders of companies get excited by it, our bosses get excited by it, and they come to us and ask, hey, like, what's the strategy here? So just want to see a question here from the responses. How many people are actually already being asked to develop a customer support strategy around ChatGPT, or to include technology like this in their support strategy? So let's get some answers in here. I see them coming in. Great to see.
Not surprising, Ben, some of those answers.
Yeah. Okay, so it looks like with this group, we're still kind of at the early stages, which is great. It shows that you guys are innovators, are at the forefront of understanding this technology before it's being asked of. So hopefully this conversation can actually be really impactful to help you start thinking about it ahead of that ask, which is really great to see. All right. So next poll question here, that's quoted over, because this will also help me give an understanding of how deep I should go. How much do you know about ChatGPT and generative AI? Throw this up on the poll as well.
And it seems like we're just hearing about ChatGPT and a lot of things, a lot of different areas. So this will be interesting to see, what level people do know about ChatGPT and how they're trying to focus on it.
Exactly. I hope that if you've signed up for this webinar, you've at least played around with it a few times. And I definitely recommend that you go and do that if you haven't. Towards the end of this discussion, I'll also give some ideas of kind of how I use it in my own personal life and how you can start to think about using it just for your own day-to-day, whether that's work-based or just, personal-based. Okay, so it does look like about half of the group has at least used it a few times. So that's really great to see. So let's start kind of at the basics here. If we take like a bird's eye view and zoom out, ChatGPT falls under this category of generative AI. And what generative AI is it's basically machine learning models that can create novel output in all types of mediums. So if you think about this, we're often seeing it in a way compared now to like Google search, for example, right? And what Google search is doing is it's taking an input, and which is like a queue, you typing in what you want to search for, and it's basically querying the internet and coming back with a bunch of content that already exists. So it's pointing you in the direction of some content that's there. How generative AI differs from that is that it's actually creating something new or novel based off of your input. And as of late, we've seen some really cool advances in the different mediums that output can take place. So basically coming in and giving it a prompt, if you will, and it can spit back out text to you, which is what we've seen with ChatGPT, which is this amazing chat bot, which we'll talk more about, that can seemingly answer any question that you have, through images. So there's platforms like Lensa or Dolly, where you can type in something super abstract. I want to see a baby eating a lollipop on a Ferris wheel. And somehow you're able to type that in and it will generate a bunch of different images which show just that. Or if you've seen a lot of people on social media, like on Instagram or on LinkedIn, changing their profile pictures to these avatars, where it's kind of these stylized versions of themselves, that's another example of this generative output. And it can also be done in audio and video. And I think there's going to be some really exciting marketing opportunities in the future where you can type in a script and it will auto-generate a video or advertisement for that. So most of the generative AI models that generate text are based off of these large language models, which you'll often hear referred to as LLMs. And basically what that means is they've been trained on this large quantity of text, also known as a corpus, where the core training task is typically some sort of next word prediction. So that's basically, there's a prompt. It goes through the LLM where it's learned. It's basically consumed all this information, and it's able to kind of predict what you're trying to get done. So an example of this that you've probably experienced on a smaller scale in real life is when you're typing a text message or drafting an email in Google, and it kind of completes that message for you. That's using this in like a very, closed, confined use case of message generation. So it's basically saying, hey, I've seen your prompt or your input, and I'm trying, and I have an understanding of what I want that output to be. And what this is now is this ability to be trained on this massive, massive amount of data. So not just Google doing it based off of emails in Gmail, but now it's basically like being trained off of this huge language model set of the internet, if you will. And it sounds simple, but it can be highly effective when these tasks are trained over millions and billions and trillions of words. So to get an LLM to generate text, you basically need to give it an input, which is known as the prompt, and then it will run through the LLM and then come out with completion. So this technology has actually been around for quite some time. And really, we've all started to hear about it because of this more like consumer application that this company called OpenAI has launched on their model, ChatGPT. So lots of big words in this, but ChatGPT basically stands for Chat Generative Pre-trained Transformer. And this is the third iteration of their GPT-3 product, which has actually been out for some time now. And companies like Ada have been working with. But historically, it was kind of based on more of an API model. And what really has taken the world by storm as of late is that they've opened this up to the public, if you will. So you can go to OpenAI's website and go to ChatGPT, and you can play around with this thing in real life. And what's so cool, what they've done with this model is they've specifically tuned it to take instructions such as identifying products in a message, summarizing text, even doing coding tasks. And ChatGPT is the first time that these models have been made more available to the public for experimentation and fun at a huge scale, where there's these use cases that are much more robust than that thing of like, oh, that's pretty cool. It predicted the next word that I wanted to say in a text or in an email. And what they've really done well in this chatbot model that they've launched is that they feed the recent conversation history back into that conversation. So when you're speaking with it, it almost appears to have this awareness of the conversation that's taking place, making the back and forth conversation much more conversational. And people are having a lot of fun with that because, you can ask it for, summarize this book or give me a recipe for how to make the best mashed potatoes. Instead of like Google, it providing you with a bunch of links, it's going to just tell you in free form writing what it believes is the best recipe. But then you can like double back and ask it for a response and say like, hey, that sounds great, but can you give me a recipe with cream? And it will come back and give another recipe. Or you can come back and say, can you give me that recipe, but speak as a pirate or in Shakespearean English, right? And what's so cool about this model is that it's been trained on such a huge corpus of data that it can really do a lot. And it's the first time that it really feels like, wow, like this is impactful technology that can really change our day-to-day life.
Hey,
So,
Ben, we
yeah.
have a couple of a question too. There's a question about what's the difference between generative AI and conversational AI?
Yeah, so generative AI is basically that aspect of the input and the output, right? So generative AI is taking a prompt and being able to generate something new based off of the learnings that they have in this LLM to create something new. So it's basically creating new text for you, creating an image for you, etc. Generative AI is basically is AI creating something new based off of your prompt. The conversational generative AI is that aspect of it being that back and forth conversation, text based, or could be voice based in the future in translating that text into voice.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
We may need to. That does. It makes perfect sense. Thank you for sharing that. And then also looks like we may need to refresh the slide deck again real quick.
So I don't know why that's happening. Can you move slides forward, please? There you go. You're able to see it there?
Yep.
Okay. And just call it out, Paul. I'm looking at this screen to see the comments, so just call it out if there's any issue with the slides that continue.
No worries. Thanks.
Any other questions, Paul, that came up before we go on?
There's another good one, but I think it'll fall later on in the slide deck, so we'll keep going.
Okay, cool. Okay, so this is all really cool and it's fun to play around with, but like, what does this really mean for our businesses? And with the launch of this, I really viewed it as like this aha wow moment, where like this is a foundational change in the technology that we have at our disposal to use. And we really believe that with this, every company will become an AI company, the same way that every company is now an internet company. So the launch of this technology is this huge jump forward in the quote unquote like usability of this type of technology. We're taking it out of being done in universities and with private companies with supercomputers and needing to have linguistic PhDs to understand how to use this, and they've democratized it and allowed us to use it as me and you non-technical stakeholders. And what's so cool about this is that we've really reached this tipping point where we're going to see this exponential movement going forward. What we're playing with in this case is ChatGPT, GPT-3. And GPT-3 was trained on 175 billion parameters, right? So think about those almost as like data points. GPT-4, which is the new model that is launching later this year, is trained on 100 trillion parameters, right? So we're talking 100 trillion versus 175 billion. It's hard to even wrap your head around how many zeros there are in that. But this is another 10x jump in the amount of data that this newest model is being trained on. And what that allows us to do is set this foundational layer under our businesses of value. So when we think about every company being an AI company, the analogy that I like to use there is this internet analogy, where it doesn't mean that our entire business is going to run on AI or we need to pivot what we're doing, but it means that the underlying infrastructure that we use to drive efficiency will change. And just as it has changed with the internet, right? This is going to help us affect how we operate internally, how we provide value to our customers, how we interact with our customers. We no longer write each other letters. We're not faxing our customers back and forth. We're not operating our business models on paper ledgers. We're using spreadsheets and cloud-based computing and customer support software to do all of that. And I think we're going to look at this transition from web-based, this transition from our business to web-based products, like moving off-prem onto more of this like digital engagement mechanism with the adoption of LLMs in business. So examples of how we're seeing that used right now is that software is being written in tandem with AI products like GitHub's Copilot. So the software developers are already kind of using AI to finish the code that they're writing. In the customer support use case, it's more around documents being drafted by these large language models and generative AI, and humans acting more as coaches that work alongside those models. And what that will help us do is the same way that the internet has helped us operate a lot more efficiently and work on more high impact tasks. All of this is going to help us reduce the time that we're spending on low impact work and provide more space for creative strategic activities. So, and my slide changed there properly? We're good?
Yep.
So we'll put up another poll now. So what's the first area of your business that you would want to deploy technology like this? Of course, we're here to talk about customer support, but I'm always interested in seeing what the audience says about that.
Not surprising that we're seeing some reducing costs.
Yeah, customer experience. Okay, it's cool to see that people are interested in sales, reduce cost of customer service. I think that improving customer service and reducing costs often comes hand in hand. And that's really what we always want to try and make both those things in tandem. That's awesome.
There was a question that was in the questions a little bit earlier too, of where would we see this in manufacturing? Maybe we can talk to that while the polls are being posted.
It's vague. I mean, manufacturing is a pretty large industry. So
it's in the need to follow up category.
Yeah, maybe post, maybe like double click on that question and post in there more specifically what you're asking. But you know, like simple ideas in manufacturing, it's like right now, if your instruction manuals, blueprints, like how things are actually being built, a lot of that can be trained on previous models or previous instructions, and then it can come out and say, hey, like what is the best way to put together this assembly line, or what is the best process for this, and a lot of that can then be auto generated based off of best practices in the market. So think about it as, instead of somebody going and studying and then coming up with their own novel output, really LLMs can start to do that for businesses. And that's where you think about this aspect that I talked about before, where it's still using humans wisely in that loop, because you want to look at it and say, hey, that makes sense, or that doesn't make sense. And we can talk a little bit about where some of the issues can come with that auto generation. But if you can double click, whoever asked that question, just kind of post a follow up of what do you mean specifically, and I can drive deeper on that.
And Ben, don't you think, regardless of the industry or the company, it's really gonna depend on the department. So marketing
100%.
department would use it a certain way, HR might use it a certain way, and so we're really seeing these automations and opportunities. I love the way you described. It's almost like we deal a lot with IT departments, and we want to get them out of break fix and get them into strategy. And I love how you associated ChatGPT with that, where you know, those simple redundant tasks, you know, let the bots do that, and then and coach them or save those complex. So I almost feel like we could sit and brainstorm so many different ideas for a particular company, but I think we'll start seeing some common threads through departmental segregation there, and saying this is how we see HR departments using automation per se. I know that that's
100%.
what we're seeing on our side, you know, dealing with a lot of that.
100%. I think it's all about the creation of content, if you will, right? So we'll talk a little bit about how to think about it from your business's perspective a bit later in this talk. But yeah, I mean, that's why I brought this up, as like, this is foundational. This is going to move to the point of, I think it's pretty rare at this point to find a business that isn't running on the internet in some way and form. Maybe in manufacturing you still will, but unlikely. And I really view this as being that next step, but it's all about it being kind of democratized and being easy enough for consumers to use. And that's a lot of what we focus on in Ada. And I'll speak about kind of how we're bringing this technology into our own use cases as well. Are you able to see the screen here?
It's still stuck on the polls.
It's so weird that it's doing that. Okay.
Let's use ChatGPT to fix that.
Yeah, exactly. You're seeing it now?
Yep.
Okay. So when we think about, like, let's think about this in the context of customer support. So when we think about customer support and like the emergence of technology like this, I think we really want to think about like these three categories of how is it going to help us solve these three things? How is it going to help us drive cost effectiveness of resolutions? Customers are coming to us. We want to be able to answer those questions at scale in an affordable manner. And we can do that in a bunch of different ways. So that can be done, you know, in its simplest form as, like, what is the simplest form of self-service? The simplest form of self-service is knowledge-based, right? Is someone going in and being able to just read or ask a question and it delivers the answer right away. And that becomes a lot easier with this type of technology, especially because most businesses have such a big data set of structured data in knowledge-based articles, right? So it becomes a lot easier to be able to go and take the content that already exists and turn it into a more conversational manner. The second is delivering a more modern customer experience. So in that, like, this is a tipping point of human behavior where customers are becoming more and more willing to interact with AI in this manner. And what this is doing is it's moving this, like, the framework beyond where it was before, where now the expectation is not that you get like a one-word answer back or a click button back, but that it's truly conversational and it's answering their questions. And then the last is empowering the people behind your customer service. So how do you make their jobs better? How do you reduce those repetitive medial tasks that they're spending a lot of time with, and start using people to actually, build out what this looks like and deliver meaningful support? And I think that is that connective tissue into driving more revenue, because you're able to use your humans more wisely, and have them start driving upsells and driving retention, etc. So while we may go and play around with something like ChatGPT and say, wow, this is incredible, like it can answer every question. If I were to just point it to my knowledge base, like I could just have a bot up and running and it could answer every question. I don't even need human support agents anymore, right? But while it's incredible to play around with, it is dangerous in its current form to be used in such a mission critical context of delivering customer support. So what are some of the reasons for that? So current LLMs are very confident, but they're often generating text that's untruthful or inaccurate. And they can also generate harmful or biased outputs, right? And that's because there's no, it's just learning based off of the data that's presented to it. And there's a lot of issues with bias. And with something like ChatGPT, they put very clear parameters around what types of things it will ask. You can't go and ask it about certain, regimes or certain parts of history, and it won't talk about them in positive manners. If you get a response on ChatGPT that's wrong or that's kind of weird, you're kind of like, oh, okay, it's still learning, whatever. But if you're doing that from a brand, it can be extremely off-putting, right? And the negative impact of interacting with a brand and getting misinformation or asking for help and it telling you a joke, which maybe is offering the help but isn't actually doing what you're asking for based off of the context of your frustration and coming to them, can be quite negative. So a way to protect yourself is to add this additional application layer above the LLM that helps you fine-tune the content for your specific use case. And that's really where the emergence of this technology becomes very exciting. So again, using that internet analogy, just like, all of these products that you're using are companies and products, but like foundationally now rely on the internet to deliver what you're using from them. The same thing is going to happen with these LLMs being a foundational layer that then businesses like Ada or other automation solutions for customer support, or things that will write blog posts for marketing, etc., are going to be built on top of these. And the reason why that's so important is because you have to give the right context to understand the specific use case of your industry. So a really simple example of this is if you go into the foundational LLM and you say something like, I need to talk to somebody, okay? It is going to associate I need to talk to somebody with I'm feeling lonely, right? And if you were to come in and say, can I speak to a supervisor? That actually wouldn't be bucketed the same, right? Because it's going to, in like natural English understanding and looking at things holistically, those two things aren't as associated. Whereas if you have a fine-tuned model and you're thinking about it much more from a customer support perspective, think about it like, how would your agent think about it? I need to talk to somebody is going to be grouped with I need to speak with a supervisor, or I need to speak with a customer support agent, as opposed to I'm feeling lonely, right? Because it's unlikely that someone's going to come and talk to your brand about feeling lonely, unless you're in very specific businesses. So that's the importance of going and not relying on something that has this huge corpus of data and isn't tuned for an industry-specific use case like ChatGPT. It can answer questions about anything, and that's what's so cool and exciting about it. But in order to be successful in launching this for a business use case like customer support, what you want to be doing is you want to be fine-tuning that and putting application layers on top of it, but still using the benefits of it to progress the deployment and use case of a product. So if we think about this in three kind of areas, the ways that I think about thinking about deploying generative AI in your business are kind of like through technology, through people, and then in the context of customer experience. So as I talked about before, the foundational layer, you're going to kind of have these two layers moving forward in your tech stack, and you should be thinking about all of the customer support software that you're using. Go and ask them, how are you incorporating a foundational layer of LLM to make our use of your product better? And then the same thing for any product that you are creating yourself that's unique in your own business offering. How are you able to do that? And we'll talk about that a bit later. So the foundational LLM is really the general purpose engine that is built like providers like OpenAI and others. And then there's this application layer that's going to sit on top of it, which is going to customize the base model specific to customer service for company-specific domains. And those are the things that are built by companies like Ada. So in this use case, we're talking about it from a CX use case, but that's the perfect example of then you would build a manufacturing use case on top of it, or a marketing use case on top of it, etc. The second is the general shift in labor skills. So how we can think about this is it's going to shift the people on your team in the customer support use case away from creating content from scratch, so away from writing those knowledge-based articles, perhaps writing the macros or scripts or direct responses when people are coming and interacting with you. And it's going to move more towards editing or verifying content. So LLMs are going to be able to auto-generate the best responses, for example, by ingesting all of your chat ticketing phone transcripts or all of your agent coaching, and start to generate like, hey, this based off of that huge corpus of data, here is the best response to this type of question. And then you have your humans, what we call in the loop, to actually go and verify like, yes, that makes sense. It's not going off of the rocker, etc. And that's because generative AI has no understanding of accuracy or truth, right? It can be very confident in its answer based off of the information you've fed it, but, it can be totally wrong. And as a result, there's going to be this premium of human skills in identifying what is in fact true, correcting mistakes, editing and improving the content over time. But we do fully expect that generative AI will both expand in scope of the number of it's going to help you expand the numbers of roles in your business. It's going to change the types of roles that there are. And then in the customer experience landscape, we really believe that this is going to make the ability to find a resolution in a self-service manner a lot more standard. And it's really going to progress what that self-service experience looks like for customers. FAQ answers become table stakes now. So the focus for businesses should be on either connecting more complex questions to humans faster, or connecting all of your back-end business systems, which of course companies like Symplicity can help with, to allow for the automation to think more about input and action. And input and action can move from input and action being, I have a question, hey, here's an answer to that question, to I have a question, I'm going to auto-generate the answer to that question because we know how to do it because we've learned from your agents and your content, etc. And I'm going to action on behalf of an agent. So instead of an agent needing to go and swivel chair to a different screen, sign into a different system, and take action, that's really where automation is going to go, because generative AI can fill so much of the gap in the middle. And I think that moving forward, the best way to measure the true impact that automation can have for an organization is how many inquiries are automatically truly being resolved without human intervention. And I think that the difference here is it's not just like how many things are being answered for the customer to then go and resolve it themselves. It's how many are being resolved by being answered and actioned on by the AI itself. Any questions about that in the chat, Paul, before we keep going?
Yeah, not specifically on that one. There is a question that asks if we need to have, or let me get back to the question so I can repeat it exactly. But it says if ChatGPT 4 is trillion parameters, does that mean that we deploy company specific, or do we need to have an AI engine or natural language processor, et cetera?
Yeah. So,
and then there's a follow-up question after that.
Okay, so I will answer that. I can answer that in the context of thinking through it from customer support with Ada. So let me answer that after we do this poll. So let's ask this poll first. So with this understanding of the technology, and I know it's complicated, I hope that I'm kind of clarifying a bit about it. How likely are you, sitting in your business role right now, how likely are you to implement technology like this in the next 12 months? And throw up that poll there, Doug. This time I won't switch to the poll. So maybe Paul, just read out what the poll is so I don't lose the screen again once you see some of the results in.
Yeah, no, it's looking really good. A couple very likely, somewhat likely is the leading contender, and a couple that are not very likely.
Cool. So I think the best way to think about how to actually incorporate this in practice is most likely to incorporate it through the vendors that either you're already using or the vendors that you are experimenting with or looking at rolling out in the next year. This should be a question that you go and you ask every single software vendor that you are evaluating. You know, what is your strategy in bringing LLMs into your product to make the human lift of development easier? So I think most companies are going to be able to take advantage of this type of technology through providers like Ada, who are building it as an underlying infrastructure. There are a lot of businesses as well that have very strong development teams that are going to be able to just use this foundationally in their own software offerings, but also in their own customer support if you want to take that build versus buy approach. So to answer the question that just came in the chat, this is the way that we really think about it. And you can replace this middle section in the yellow dotted line, which is Ada now, with really any software provider, not just for customer support, but for any use case. Okay. So there's this underlying.
Can you forward your presentation?
Yeah. It's weird. It's forwarding on my side. How about now? Good. Yep. You can see the slide. Yeah. So there's the foundational LLM, which can be built by a company like OpenAI. Amazon's launching one. Google has one. There's open source opportunities for this. That's going to be the thing that is fun to play around with as a consumer, but companies like Ada are actually building products on top of. Okay, and then your point solution is going to build out a customer support, in this use case, LLM, on top of that foundational LLM, so that when we are going and working with a company, we're basically looking at the foundational LLM. Our product is taking all of the customer support data as a layer on top of that foundational LLM to solve that problem of, I'm feeling lonely, I want to talk to a supervisor, that I showed before. And then we're taking industry-specific use cases. So you can think about different terminology, like if you're working with an airline, saying, I need to make an adjustment to my seat, is different than if you're talking to a cloud software provider, where a seat actually means a user provisioned with a license, right? And then you're able to put on top of that customer-specific data, right? So your personal knowledge-based data, etc., which stays unique to you. So in platforms like Ada, we have this foundational understanding that's built on top of the LLM, and I'll give you some examples of where we use that to make the human lift easier so that your humans, your agents, can focus on more important things. And then what we do in the builder experience of building out automation that we know will drive value for your customers is have this customer support subset knowledge base, as well as an industry or vertical knowledge base, as well as your personal information. And all of that, all of the messages basically run through that whole more streamlined context when talking to a customer across all the channels. So whether that is them coming in and talking over web chat, through social messaging channels, through a phone call with our phone automation, etc. And you can think about this, like if we go back to the marketing example, same thing, there's companies out there that will help you write blog posts, right? So what they do is they use the foundational LLM, then they go and they've tuned the responses specific around this is what makes an impactful blog post, let's optimize it for SEO, et cetera, so it sits on top of that. So some examples of, yep, go ahead.
Ben, there was a question that was in there, and I think you just answered it really well with that slide. You know, is ChatGPT its own database to generative AI?
Yes, so ChatGPT is, so OpenAI is the company that launched ChatGPT. They've built out a massive large language model, LLM, which is GPT, which is in its third iteration, GPT-3. And ChatGPT is basically the chat interface that sits on top of it. So what ChatGPT is it's this consumer-facing interface that turns that large language model into a conversational manner that allows you to go back and forth and interact with the brand. And there are a bunch of other providers, I'll share some of the names pretty shortly, that offer it. You know, what OpenAI has done really well is they're very well funded, and they've been able to go to market in a way that is really quite expensive, but they've been able to go and give this out essentially to the public to go and use. And now investors in OpenAI, like Microsoft, are rolling out that same type of conversational chat interface directly within their search engine. So if you go to bing.com now, there's actually like a chat engine on that search bar that allows you to go and search Bing in a conversational manner similar to ChatGPT. So we're starting to see it being used in these different use cases. Companies like Ada will action on ChatGPT's and OpenAI's APIs. Okay, so some examples of how we're using this in practice. The way that we think about this is all about coming back to that concept I talked about in the very beginning. How do you use your humans wisely within your business? So when you come in and you train a response in Ada, it's all about that input or prompt and then the output. Historically, humans, your support agents and our team, have had to go and write out the content that you would want to have the bot answer. So if you come in and you say, I want to reset my password, historically, humans would go in and say, hey, here's a bunch of different ways that somebody could ask that question. I'm not sure, I don't know how to access my account. I need to reset my password. I can't seem to log in. Those are all different ways of saying the same thing. And historically, you would, in building conversational AI, you would type in a bunch of different ways and then it would train. And companies like Ada have historically been very good at it, where you've only had to write in a couple. More self-training models, you've had to write in hundreds of intents or have the exact match of what they needed to say. And that's why when you go and you interact with a lot of chatbots, you'll ask a question and it will say, like, sorry, I'm still learning, or I'm not understanding what you're saying, because the intent recognition isn't that good. So what we've been doing in our product for quite some time now is we've actually had the training suggestions be built out through OpenAI's GPT model. So if you type in, hey, if somebody comes in and asks me this, I want it to lead to this answer, we can auto-generate a bunch of different ways in which someone can ask that question. So what that does is it makes the builder experience, or the ability for you to go out and build out a bot, a lot easier. Did the slide just change? Is it working properly here? Perfect.
Yep.
So now where does this go next? So where we get really excited is, okay, it's great to be able to auto-generate the questions that someone may ask for training, but how do you auto-generate the content? And this is where the future becomes really exciting. So on our roadmap that we're launching in the next few months is this ability to automatically ingest content like your website, your knowledge-based content, your transcripts, and auto-generate the content in the bot with minimal builder effort. Historically, Ada, the bot builder at your business, a partner like Symplicity would go in and they would sit with you. We'd understand, hey, what are your main case drivers? What are your main knowledge-based articles? Get that information and then distill it into more conversational content. With this type of technology, we are launching the ability for you to basically press a button and it will auto-generate all the content. So now instead of having humans write it to then scale through automation, it's going to auto-generate. And what your humans will do is they'll go and they'll say, yeah, that makes sense, that's accurate, et cetera, which is really great. And then from a business standpoint, what's really cool is that you can stop kind of relying on the measure of success being, was this message contained, right? Containment is this aspect that we've historically thought about from a bot standpoint, where we said like, hey, like if the conversation didn't progress, then that's a success because it didn't get to an agent. But we don't know if that really means that the customer had their problem solved, that the customer just left and came in and called instead. So we'll be able to go and ingest information from your tickets, your phone calls, et cetera, and create a much stronger ROI model with higher accuracy to understand, did that customer interaction actually result in somebody not coming back and getting what they needed? And that's really exciting for us. So we talked a lot about OpenAI's product here. One of the questions was, what are the other ones? So NVIDIA, Google BERT, AWS, Cohere, these are all platforms that are building out essentially what OpenAI has. So that's going to become this new ecosystem of different providers that we can select, pretty similar to how we can choose our cloud-based provider, right? And that's a lot of what Symplicity is going to do when they work with you to say, are you optimizing for the best solutions, et cetera. And I think as you think about strategically deploying LLMs in business, the important thing for you to start asking yourselves and your company are these two things. So the first is, what is the unique data set that your business has that you can incorporate or put on top of an LLM? What customer information do you have? Maybe it's your knowledge base, maybe it's proprietary information, et cetera, because that's going to be what will differentiate you from competition and create your defensibility. The second is, what's the unique product offering that you want your most skilled developers to be working on? Do you want your development resources to be building something custom to help you with your customer support, which is a decision that some companies make? Or would you rather those people work on the core of your product and then work with a company like Ada that is basically a point solution built on top of it so that your customer support stakeholders can have full control over the delivery of your automated customer support, launching a chatbot, managing a chatbot, and eventually connecting all the different systems in the back end? Because what's so cool that all of this is moving to this progress to being more codeless. If you can have generative AI write code for you by just putting in a written prompt, I want to connect this system to that system, generative AI will soon be able to connect those systems by writing the code to do it. So what it means is that our customer support teams that understand how to actually deal with customers, what's most important, will be able to go and ship these integrations, which then someone can just go and make sure it makes sense, et cetera, which is really cool. We'll share these links after, but here's some of the content that I found to be really useful in my understanding of generative AI. So there's a podcast here, there's a video, there's a good article to read. And then if you go onto Ada's website, we've created a generative AI hub, which has a bunch of different assets that you can go and learn from. And if you want to get in contact with me, my email is ben@ada.support. My LinkedIn is there, and definitely go and play around with the bot on our website at ada.cx. So we've got a couple of minutes here. Would love to answer any other questions that we have in the chat. And yeah.
Very good. No, thank you, Ben. That was really good. There's a good question that popped in the chat right there towards the end about, if we're ingesting all of the client data to help answer these questions in the large language model, what happens if the data is not clean or if there's conflicting information in there?
Well, I mean, so that comes down to the importance of having the human in the loop and working with the technology. So first of all, you need to redact all PII, right? You can't have customer information fed into these models, nothing that's specific to an individual. But that's the importance of being able to look at your data set and then work with a company that can properly take that data set and ingest it for that use case, right? And some of these there's a bunch of stuff that is available on your website right now that someone can go and ingest, right? So you need to be very careful about what data you're feeding into the model because it's essentially learning from that data.
Very good. And just a couple of follow-up questions too. What would you say are the major limitations of LLMs?
Yeah, so I think you can break that into these like 4 categories: accuracy, explainability, safety, and continuous improvement. So accuracy is what it's generating true, right? Like that's the first most important thing. Is this right? And I think that there's been a lot of examples of things being unfactual. In fact, Google just did their big launch of their product, BART, which had a very kind of niche inaccuracy in one of its answers, and it wiped out a huge amount of market cap for that company, right? So, I mean, that was pretty niche in terms of what it was wrong about, but you can think about that in the context of customer support. It's very important that you're accurate in your responses. The explainability is difficult right now and what we mean by that is, why is it generating this answer? Whether it's right or wrong, these LLMs are a bit of a black box. So you're going to put in an input, it's going to spit out an output, but there's very little for you to understand about why it's giving that output. Like in a way, it's its own thought process at that point. The safety, so is this generating harm? Is what it's generating harmful? Is it rude? Is it racist? You have to think about the bias that it's being trained on. And then this aspect of continuous improvement. So how do you actually make it better over time? And that continuous improvement could be by having people in your business in the loop answering. It can also be through the end users or consumers that you're interacting with, giving thumbs up or thumbs down, etc. So right now, there are a lot of major limitations in using this in customer-facing business context. And OpenAI is the first to say it. Sam Altman, their CEO, that tweeted out saying this is like essentially for fun at this point, but we are going to see progression really, really quickly.
Very good. And we got 2 minutes left, and there's 2 other questions here that popped into the chat. Can this be deployed for getting data out of analytics?
Yes. So I think that is going to be one of the most exciting use cases that I can think of. Think about this in this ability to be able to go and query data systems, like from a RevOps point of view. Like companies are going to emerge that will come out and say like, hey, like give me a pie chart that shows the difference in customer contact time for our main support inquiries, and it will just create that image for you based off the data. So I think that is super exciting and interesting for the future state of where technology can go. It can't really be done on the large language model, but it can be done by your team building something on top of it, or there's going to be a bunch of businesses that will come up with that specific use case.
Very good. And last question that we'll have time to answer. NLP and LLP, is it just a terminology difference, or is it very different?
So generally, you would look at NLU or NLP, which is like natural language processing or natural language understanding. Those are pretty similar terms. Yeah.
And LLP?
Yeah. Well, LLM is, I think LLM is the large language model. Maybe someone's being confused.
That might be what they're asking, yeah. And Joe, if we didn't answer that question, let us know and we can follow up with you at a later time. But
yeah,
you guys, thank you very much for your time. Catherine, we'll let you wrap it up for us real quick. And
awesome. Thanks everyone for joining. We will follow up to make sure you get the recording. And if there's any further follow-up that you'd like from us, we'd love to have an opportunity to have the conversation and continue it. So have a wonderful day. Happy Valentine's Day.
Thanks everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Have a great one.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, guys.